Welcome to the People Strategy Forum podcast. We're a show that guides leaders on how to elevate the workforce. We believe that people are at the heart of successful organizations, and a team member's well-being, their rewards, career development, it's all essential to a happy and healthy, highly productive workforce. So this show discusses the practical and effective leadership strategies for top executives, senior professionals, and talent managers overall. So first, I would love to introduce you to our host today. We have a couple of us here today. We have Howard Niswitz, and Howard Niswitz is a seasoned compensation advisor and strategic HR consultant with over 30 years of experience. And also myself, my name is Sam Reeve. I'm the founder of CompTeam. I'm a global expert in talent and compensation management strategies. I help companies put in the critical infrastructure to pay their people fairly and to scale across the globe, which brings us to a very important person on our guest list today. Today, I am thrilled to introduce Sean Stoltz. Sean is a division president at LightSource and a veteran in HR payroll. So Sean brings nearly a decade of expertise in guiding companies through the nuances of global expansion, particularly in the complex arena of international hiring. From his early days as a professional baseball player at the Tampa Bay Rays, we're going to be diving into a little bit of that with Sean, to leading sales teams at notable PEOs and developing LightSource's employee of record services. Sean's journey has been marked by exceptional teamwork and strategic foresight. So today we're going to be talking about the topic of hiring employees anywhere and how to navigate the complexities of hiring globally, where Sean is going to share his invaluable insights on navigating the challenges of building a workforce that spans continents overall. So whether you're a startup, eyeballing new markets, or establishing a firm that simply wants to diversify, Sean's experiences are strategically poised to enhance your understanding and execution in global hiring practices. Well, welcome, Sean. How are you doing today?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on.
Yes. First of all, I know that you've been, doing this type of work for quite a time now. And can you kind of dive in a little bit into your beginnings as a professional athlete and how that came to play or came to pass into what you're doing now as helping companies really expand globally?
Well, in celebration kind of the Lake Mary Little team who just won the Little League World Series, I played baseball my entire life. My dad was a minor league baseball player, and my mom got me into it. My dad was one of those people that didn't want to push me, but my mom got me into it. My dad was coaching me, and so I just played baseball my whole life. And I was fortunate enough where I grew up in an area where it was highly competitive when I was in South Florida. So there was just an amazing amount of talent to really push you and allow you to excel. But I think that's kind of in sports, in life in general, is really what puts together that first competitive fire in you, and you start to develop your work ethic around just wanting to be better, right? How can I get better? And the better you are at what you do, you also start to recognize how good everyone else is as well, right? Because when you're going up against the top talent, then you recognize the weaknesses sometimes in your game and what you need to do. So it really starts to, formulate that early idea of how can I find ways to improve, right? What do I need to do to improve? What research do I need? Where do I need to go? Who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to listen to? What do I need to watch? Those type of things. And I think it lays the foundation for just what I would believe is one of my core strategies is just continuous improvement. To me, there's always something that can be improved, whether it's a little thing here or there or just those type of things. And so when I got into high school, we were extremely competitive. I was lucky enough to go to St. Thomas, which is in South Florida. And, I was able to play both baseball and football. And baseball was really my calling. And so my senior year was fantastic. And then that brought the college scouts. And so I was fortunate enough to get recruited to play Division I baseball. And so then went there for a couple years, and then went to North Carolina State for a couple years and played there. Was fortunate enough to play also in the Cape Cod League over the summer, which is a very prestigious league for summertime baseball, which then led into my junior year, which I had a very good end of the season. I was able to get drafted. And so I was a 13th round pick of the Tampa Bay Rays in the 1996 amateur draft. And so it was an extraordinary experience to kind of play. And that's really kind of how I got started. I was fortunate enough to kind of, the cards fell in the right place for me to get drafted. And so I wanted to play, minor league baseball for a little bit and kicked it around. And, obviously I'm here. So, and you haven't heard my name before probably. So it wasn't what I had hoped it would be, but I can tell you that it was an amazing experience to play professional baseball, be around some of the greatest players that ever been, who were our coaches at the time. And I played with some people that eventually were big leaguers. So it was an extraordinary experience. And I can tell you, it really laid a great foundation for just kind of the rest of my life as, how I would go about trying to solve problems.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, of course, in playing sports and so forth, I mean, it does have its career path, but it's a matter of time, right? We as we get older, it's just we have to find other things to do, of course.
It's the first time for most people when you're very good when you're younger, right? You get a little bit of an ego, you get a little overconfident, you get to think that kind of like, the world revolves around yourself. And then as you keep moving up the levels, there's some people where that continues to happen their entire lives, right? I'm sure LeBron James is, he's always kind of been the best at what he's done since he's been everywhere. But for the rest of us, there comes the humbling time where you realize that you're just not it anymore, and that you can't cut it, and that other people are a lot more talented than you. And then it's kind of your first experience in life that you're not the best person anymore. You're not even close to the best person. You now are probably one of the worst people on in the world of the best. And so, you kind of understand what it feels like to kind of be on that bottom of the barrel, to go through the slumps, to all of a sudden have your confidence shaken. And so, there really isn't anyone there to kind of make you feel better about it, right? There's no HR department on a baseball team. There's hey, we're going to give you a pink slip, and it's coming, and there really isn't any way to get around it. So, they don't have resources there to keep you around. That you're going home, and so. That is kind of the first time where it was very humbling to say, hey, you gotta eat a piece of humble pie. You got to go home, and you got to figure out what you're going to do next, because your career has just been shattered. Because you always have the idea that you're going to be successful. And when you're not, you're like, okay, what am I going to do now? Right. Because there's not like a feeder program like, oh, you can't play minor league baseball and just go be a lawyer. Like, that doesn't work that way. Right. There's no career path after you get released from baseball. It's kind of like, go figure it out. So, you get hit in the face with a go figure it out. And then, life becomes a little bit more a little more difficult for you. So, but it was fun, right? I gotta say, I enjoyed every minute of it until you get your papers that you get sent home.
And yet here you are, right? I mean, you're in a, and fortunately for a lot of businesses out there, I mean, you've gained the expertise on how to help companies expand globally and so forth. And so, tell me about that specifically. I mean, what is the vehicle that is used to be able to expand or help companies expand in a global nature today?
Yeah, definitely. Throughout my career, I started out in the PEO industry, which had got me into HR outsourcing. So I learned kind of the co-employment relationship. And so it kind of brought me to LightSource, where I was at. And then when I got to LightSource, it was the first time I had come across employer of record model. And so I dove a little bit deeper into the employer of record model, because in the world of we were an acquisition to Venture Employer Solutions, who owns about 85 different companies now. And LightSource, I needed to differentiate. I needed to figure out how we were going to play in this huge sandbox of all of these companies that were going to be acquired, because I was acquisition number 13. But I had constantly heard from our CEO that we are not stopping, right? 50, however many. So I had to figure out, how are we going to differentiate ourselves? And so one of the things I recognized was they had this employer of record model. And at the time, it wasn't probably what I would say, it wasn't what we have now, but I could see some genius in the model, and then I could obviously see some flaws. And so when I came in and I saw that this could be our key to success, how am I going to learn? How am I going to dive in and get a better understanding of what this is? And then how can I take what I'm seeing and capitalize on some of the real brilliant ideas here, and kind of filter out some of the, I would say, less than great ways that it's being used, right? So maybe the exploitive measures that had been maybe done in the past. And so I wanted to kind of eliminate those and figure out, how can I take this to the next level? And so I was very fortunate that Venture and our CEO, Alex Campos, has an amazing high acceptance of risk. And so he basically, with the corporate attorneys, and had some conversations, and they were willing to start absorb a lot more risk than PEO was willing to absorb, right? So instead of co-employment, I was now moving into, we don't have a problem if we're the employer. And when I heard that, I was like, that's a game changer, right? Because in my PEO career, that was sometimes a limitation when you couldn't, some people just wanted to not have employees in certain places. They'd be like, hey, but there was no solution for that. So we started to build upon that and expand upon that. And due to our great sales team throughout venture, they were able to bring us in close with a lot of different companies that they were hearing something and they didn't have a solution for it. They're like, well, we don't have anything to do for that. And then they would tell a story in the office, and the office would be like, hey, wait a second, call Sean down, and like, I think this sounds like what I heard him talking about. I think this would be a good fit. And I used to have sales rep call me and say, we can't, there's no way we can do this, right? We can't, this isn't real, is it? And I would be like, 100%, we can definitely do this. This is a home run, like slam dunk. And the sales reps were like, you got to be kidding me. This is the greatest thing I've ever heard. And so it really gained popularity just because we were solving something that everyone thought couldn't be done. And now all of a sudden, not only could it be done, the companies that they were working with were so excited. The sales process was so much easier because we were meeting a need like extremely important and timely. And so these deals started to close very fast, and popularity, when you can start closing deals very fast for sales reps and have a lot of success, then the stories in and of itself starts to grow. So it was amazing how fast we grew.
So let's back up there a little bit, and just to kind of, for our listeners, explain what employer of record means. What is that?
Sure. Absolutely. So when you're looking at employment in and of itself, right, you have direct employment relationships, and then we have what we call professional employer relationships, which is like a co-employment with 50-50, and the company helps you out with benefits and workers' compensation and some of the things that businesses have to deal with in silos. So they try to put those together and handle those for you in a one-stop shop type of an environment. And then the employer of record takes that a step further. So there is unique scenarios to where a company either can't hire someone for some legal reason or a purpose, right? And so they need someone to hire the employee on their behalf and then assign that employee back to them for work for various reasons. And so the employer of record comes in to where we become the employer for that particular employee. We give them, and we have them sign our handbook, offer letters, everything comes from us. But then what happens is now the employee can work for the company, but still capitalize on all the infrastructure, all the culture that we've created, all the benefits that we have, the retirement packages, things that their company didn't have access to or were limited in that reason. Now we can take it to the next level and really offer what the company wanted to or had hoped to, but unfortunately was unable to, or was not in the best interest of the company. And so they use us, and we can bring it to another level. So we have very highly compensated employees that we take care of for either international companies or domestic companies.
And are you truly global? Are all locations?
We have connections to global. So LightSource in and of itself, we have global partners that have relationships in 175 countries. So if our sales reps come to us, we can connect them with a partner who can help them hire across the globe.
So maybe you can walk us through an example, because I think examples are always good. So I'm a U.S. employer, and I'm looking to hire someone, let's say in Spain.
Correct.
And we have no setup right currently in Spain.
Correct.
How does that work? Maybe you can just kind of walk us through that.
Absolutely. So usually the first thing that happens is either from a colleague in the HR industry, maybe you'll hear of someone who they use, but most of the time you'll search out for an employer of record or an EOR, as that is the global employment model would start to kick in. So now you would say, okay, we don't have an entity. We don't know Spain. We don't want to set up Spain. That's just that. But we need someone in Spain, right? It's absolutely essential that we're there. So you'll search out a global employer or an employer of record. So it's a common business model in international companies because they don't separate things like we do. So since everything is so streamlined, an employer of record model is how most U.S. businesses are employing people overseas. And so they'll reach out to a global employer, and then what they'll happen is that employer will connect them or hire them directly for the company in Spain, and then basically just invoice them, but take care of everything in Spain. So that employee can now, obviously through the internet and through many communications that we have, do everything that they would normally do for the company, say if they were stateside, but now they're doing it from Spain, obviously for the strategic reason. And all they're doing is getting an invoice from the global employer, paying the invoice, and then the global employer is taking care of benefits, taxes, everything that is necessary in that country, because they have the expertise to say all of these things are necessary. And so we're just making you aware of what you need to provide for the employee in this country, and we'll take care of all the legal obligations, all the contracts, all the employment agreements for you, or advise you as to how you want to set these up successfully.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So does it, so I think Howard brought up a good point. So maybe we're hiring one person, but what if I'm hiring 50, 100 people in Spain?
Yes.
Is this model still viable for that?
It all depends probably on the budget and the amount of offload that it would require. So if you're maybe a company that's Microsoft or NVIDIA or somebody of that size, to where you have 10, 20, 30,000 employees and 100 to you is like one to someone else, then it makes a lot more sense, because you just don't want to run the risk of doing something wrong in a country. And the penalty of doing it wrong in Spain to Microsoft is so much larger than any savings they would get by trying to hire someone there and maybe running the risk of making a mistake in a country. And then before you know it, you're sitting in Spanish court. That's the last place you really want to be as a large public company. So I would imagine it depends upon the budget of the company and how much. Like if 50% of your labor force was there, then I would imagine you'd want an executive and you would want to try to create a Spanish entity, because you've committed to Spain as a massive revenue source versus maybe a project that could be a one-off for a Microsoft or an NVIDIA, one of those size companies.
Great. Thanks for that distinction. And so when we think about an organization, so let's another scenario. So where a company, a small tech company, is thinking about expanding globally. I mean, to make sure that their clients are supported in different locations, or perhaps they're just simply trying to take advantage of the lower cost of labor, so labor arbitrage in some areas. What are some of the first steps that you would recommend a company in considering this type of international expansion?
Well, the most important thing is finding the right geography for what you're looking for. So if you're looking very specifically, there are some parts of the world that specialize or have highly skilled labor force. And I think the easiest one that we all have is a lot of IT used to be headquartered out of India, right? So there was a ton of India, United States, tech, customer service, and those type of things. So that kind of grew very quickly, huge labor force, highly skilled individuals. And then now in other areas, say in the medical field or maybe in semiconductors and those type of things, you might look to more like even a Taiwan, or you might look to other areas to where you're growing the product, because they might be opening a factory, or where these companies are going, you might want to have someone on site, because a lot of times, while you can work remotely, relationships are big. And so if you really want to be a client of some of the larger companies in the world, they would prefer to meet people in person and have someone who can be of local assistance. So I would say that really what you want to focus on is your vertical, making sure you're finding the right labor force, and do some research and check where are some of the hot spots, because you might be surprised that areas like African countries like Nigeria is growing with an extremely highly talented labor force. Colombia, the Central America, even Hispaniola. So there's a lot of different areas. So I wouldn't automatically assume. I would try to do some research and find out where are the hot spots for talent, because you might be surprised at even some of the areas to where it could be, to your say, the labor arbitrage could be significantly in your favor, just like everyone else trying to find the best value for any other thing, maybe real estate equivalent, same thing, trying to find the best employee that's for your company and the needs that you're looking for. Just don't automatically assume that you know where to go. I would definitely do your research now.
And speaking of research, does your organization help with some of that research in different locations? And
so some of our partners, for instance, have like a Countryopedia, or they have some of the things that can say, some countries honestly are more difficult. I think, we wouldn't be talking about saying that California is a difficult state as an employer to be in. I mean, it's true. There's nothing really against it. It's a great state with very talented employees, but some countries are also very difficult. So sometimes while you might think it's a great idea, it could be very difficult, and the economics and just the economy of that country might be prohibitive. So a lot of our partners are very transparent and have a lot of the information available, so you can understand the taxation and you can understand some of the other things. I mean, there's some countries that have taxes up to 60% for an employer. That could be very difficult. You could think that, oh, I'm just going to hire someone in this country, and then you're like, wait a second, I'm almost paying double of what I would be paying just because of the taxation and the benefits and some of the things and some of the legal requirements. Sometimes you're forced to hold on to an employee for years if you hire them in some countries. So, they have to know those things. And so a lot of I partner with companies that are educational. They want to let you know, and so you can make the most informed decision for your business, because if you make the wrong one, it could be extremely costly.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. So let's go into some of those cautionary points. I mean, because I've gone into in my work as a compensation consultant. Sometimes I'm shocked when I go into an organization and they say, "Oh yeah, we have people spread out all over these different locations."
Right.
And I was like, "Well, do you have an established entity there?" Or asking some different questions. What are some of the problems that you've seen and you've experienced that clients come to you and they've maybe gone the wrong way at start, and then they come to you for a solution?
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's companies, they're small, right? So they think, hey, I'm hiding, I'm doing the best I can. There's a lot of times where they want an A for effort, and A for effort doesn't work in states, or it doesn't work in countries, right? And so they've put systems in place to where it's, we're paying them, selling them money, or we're paying them as a 1099, or we're just kind of, sending them this for health insurance and those type of things. It's just because they're just trying to make it work. Something usually has happened to throw them off their game, right? And I think we can all say that 2020 threw everyone off of their game when everyone was forced to work from home and we all had to adjust to a completely different work environment. And so I would say that dynamic in and of itself threw a lot of companies a ton of curveballs as to highly valuable employees moving, relocating, and then trying to make it work, because now what it did is it stressed, like, hey, I might know as much as I can about my local state, Florida, California, Texas, but I don't really know anything about Illinois. Hey, we're just going to kind of 1099, you find your own health insurance, and we're going to highly compensate you, but this is just going to be easier on us because we really don't have the time and energy to do that. Or they tried to do the best they can and said, "Oh, we'll give you a stipend for health insurance. We don't really have a plan because we have a self-insured plan here." So there's many different variables that make it very, very difficult administratively to do things, and you think they're easy, but they just become more difficult, and little mistakes can add up, like forgetting to close accounts, opening up other accounts. Did I get a disability account? Oh, I didn't even know the state required that. And then before you know it, the employees are very wise to it. And then so one bad conversation and you decide to let that employee go, you're going to learn real quick what the laws of that state were if you made a mistake. So there's much more liability on your plate to be a multiple state or even a global employer. And it really requires a lot of due diligence. And many times outsourcing or finding a partner who spends all their time doing that is probably the best thing budgetarily and liability wise for the company. In the long run, when you do a long-term evaluation of that process.
So the liability sits with you as the EOR versus the company?
In our EOR, contractually, we take on full responsibility for the employees. We create the offer letters. We create all of the leave policies. We administer everything according to the laws that exist based upon employer of record or interpreting laws of joint employment relationships. And so we take on 100% of the responsibility. We do COBRA all the way through post-termination, right? And every EOR, I would say, operates a little differently based upon the contract, but we are 100% as much liability as a company can take on legally. We have taken that on as LightSource.
Does that include ER issues, employee relation issues, or
every EOC complaints, you name it? We handle everything from a legal perspective. Everything that gets filed, we know about it if the person worked for us. And so we take care of those things. The handbook, escalation policies, everything that needs to be handled. We basically hold the employee's hand. We walk them through it. And just like they were an employee of a Fortune 500 company, that's
Mm.
the way we treat them. And so we have everything as much as we possibly can. We've thought of every possible way so far that something could go wrong, and we've tried to have a solution in place to handle that for the company, for our partners.
Would a small company do that domestically, just
Yes.
so they don't have
Yes.
liability?
Yes, it's becoming extremely popular in the United States as the search for talent has evolved, right? And more, there are certain careers who have decided as a group, we're going to work from home. IT, the world of IT has decided if I'm going to work for you, you're going to get real comfortable with people working remotely. And I think that most of the time, once you have an employer of record, you have no limitations. If you don't, then you sort of kind of have to prepare to hire someone. So what if we find somebody in New York, or what if we find somebody in California? Now you're starting to weigh the decision of New York versus California. And now you're not really picking the best employee. You're kind of picking the best employee under a certain circumstance. Well, when I come in, doesn't matter where you hire the employee. Everyone is exactly the same to me. So I want you to hire the best employee, and it doesn't matter where it is. I've got you covered. So that way you can make the decision that's best for your business without having to weigh pros and cons. It's more like we found the best employee. And so domestically, as the search for talent has spread and it's gotten harder to find it locally, people are a lot more comfortable the more they embrace our solution, because they can just basically, it goes away, right? It's automatically problem solved because they know that we contractually take everything on, and now they're covered everywhere outside of where they have what I call essential states for business. Non-essential states are where employees have migrated to or might have to move for reasons, unbeknownst to them when they first got hired there. So it's becoming extremely popular.
Interesting. What about headcount? Does the employees that are hired through you count as against headcount for the company?
No, they won't count, but there are certain things that will apply. So let's just say, equity factors. There's a lot of things that we do proactively to make sure that if you are with the company, or whatever you offer for the company, you must offer the employees that we have. Like, it must be equitable. Like, you're coming to us for a very specific person. We're not a workaround. We're not a way for you to skirt your responsibilities as a business. We're here because legitimately you're owning up to, hey, this area is something that I don't know. I know Miami, I know Florida and Ohio great because I'm a car dealership. I do Ohio, I do Florida, right? I grew up in Ohio. I had summertime in Florida. I built car dealerships. I do not know Missouri. I do not know New Mexico. But my finance managers needed to move back there, take care of their mothers. And I don't know those two states. So please do these two states so I don't have to worry about it, and I can focus on Florida and Ohio. So those type of situations are coming up more and more. It's helping companies retain the best people that they have, increasing company culture, and it's also allowing people to feel more transparent, to have more of that, not work-life balance so much, but just that caring side of life, where they don't have to say, oh, I got to go to work tomorrow. Love you, Mom. Hope your doctor's appointment goes well. Right? They can fly, they can live there, they can move there, and there's a better conversation to be had with business owners and C-levels with employees that you find that are very, very important.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's this.
So COVID actually really helped your business.
Well, I started building it in 2020. I was working on it at the end of 2019 and the beginning of 2020 of putting it all together contractually, because I was getting the buy-in, because the business model that we had was not, the EOR that they had was not all in, as I told you, right? It was kind of half. It was a little bit like co-employment. It was a little off of it. So I had to get the buy-in from the legal team and the compliance team. Are you okay with all this liability? Because it's a lot. Like, there's a lot we're taking on. And they were like, I'm fine with it if we know that you're in control of it, right? If you're setting it up and we know it's set up the right way, and I worked with our compliance, our legal team, to think of everything that we possibly could. We can't think of everything, but as much as we could. And they were fine with it. So then when COVID hit, I was kind of like, I felt bad kind of, because I was like, this is going to be really good for us, but this is horrible for a lot of people right now. But coming out of it, it threw the whole work environment into a complete meltdown on things. And there was people scrambling significantly. And so we were able to pick up over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, some of those band-aids that were put together just got where they couldn't keep the dam together and they needed some help. And so some larger businesses have reached out, and we've been able to capture some large audiences for certain industries. That has been extremely, good for both parties.
So is this a remote only solution, or what if I need somebody to come on site?
So we can hire anyone, right? So it doesn't really matter to us. So sometimes, let's just say if it's outside of your industry, for something that you've always kept separate, or someone's been doing this, and so let's say a large company has been using a third party for maybe disability payments, or they've been using them for some other service, and this person was used to having all these employees in one location. But now, because of the post-COVID, now these employees are starting to spread out all over the place. Now what's happening is, right now we're coming to the table and we're starting to see some of those larger opportunities come in, because of it's just outgrown a lot of companies, and some of these problems have become more pervasive. So now what happens is they'll segment a population. So we had maybe a grocery store chain reach out and they wanted to separate a group of IT professionals just into a different company. Or we've had a school that say was maybe of a certain faith, but they might have needed professors that they couldn't technically hire by the bylaws of the school. But they had some professors that were extremely good and they had an opportunity to capture them, but they weren't of the faith. So sometimes regionally within a certain environment, there becomes a time to where a model like ours will help a business meet the needs that it needs without having to obviously go against maybe some core setup, or the way the company was set up 50, 60, 70 years ago before this was even thought about happening. So sometimes locally we can come in and assist. It's very rare, but we can do it if necessary.
Okay, but what about a situation where this is a kind of like a hybrid type of management relationship, where we require the person to come into the office a few days a week? Is that something that's acceptable under this type of arrangement?
For us, as long as we know the job description, what the employee is doing in our workers' comp carrier and our general liability carrier, and they're totally on board and it's transparent, the employees can go anywhere. Right, to us, right? So, we have employees that go onto construction sites. We have employees that are on oil rigs. We have employees that can do certain things that maybe they couldn't even do for their company because of the risk, right? That just was something they want to take on. But if an employee has to go into the office, that's fine. We do have employees that do work in offices for companies in states.
So is there something that's unique or different, or a particular challenge that an employer needs to be aware of when going into an employee of record situation?
What I would say is make sure you're in the situation you think you're in. Don't trust that you're in the situation. If something is off and you think that something is incomplete, or the company is indemnifying themselves versus something that you think is a key piece of the business, and make sure that you understand the full life cycle of the employee and don't think you have everything covered. Are they going to take care of those employees post-employment as well, right? Are the proper unemployment accounts set up? Will the disability payments be there if they need to? Do they have COBRA already set up? And those type of things. So I think you need to understand first who you're partnering with, right? And I think you should do some research on it to see who the bigger players are, because the bigger players, like I would say, when you were looking at some of the competitors, they have on their website, and they're all saying the same thing: hire your employees, help you expand your business, those type of things. Not like, hey, if your workers' comp is being canceled, or if you're in trouble with the state government, we can help you out. Those type of things. You don't want to look for the EORs that are rescuing companies. You want to look for the EORs that are helping companies grow, expanding their footprint, and still looking for the best available talent all over the globe.
Okay.
I think that'll point you in the right direction.
So let's take a different perspective.
Sure.
So let's look at a couple of perspectives. One, what is the experience of a relationship like this, an employee of record relationship for an employer? And then secondly, let's talk about the employee experience. So first of all, what's the experience from the employer standpoint when they have some internal employees and they have some employees that are part of an employee record agreement?
Yeah, and for the employers that we've had domestically, let's say we have a company domestically that hires domestically, right? Let's just take an example. Hawaii is popular, right? So a lot of companies in Hawaii like to focus on the employees in Hawaii. And if they're going to hire someone in the contiguous United States, it's easier for them to use an EOR because Hawaii is so specific. So in that case, for them, it's really a relief for them once they go through the process, because it's very stressful to try to say, we are doing so many great things here and we need to hire this employee, but we can't take care of them like we can't. What are we going to find? So they call a company and a PEO has to have this and a payroll company has to have this, and everyone can't really help them and find the solution. So when they come to us, most of the time it's a huge relief. Like, we didn't even know this existed. We didn't know that we could do this. Oh my gosh, you can basically do exactly what we do. You can give them everything that we offer here, there, where we thought this was impossible. I literally one time had a CFO on the call said, so you don't want my 120 employees in Hawaii. You just will take by 3 in Massachusetts, Texas. I was like, I just want the 3. You keep the 120. Every other call was, in order for me to have the 3, I have to have the 120. So he had been on 7 calls with basically PEOs, and the PEOs had its limitation. He was like, we don't need any help on the 120. I only need the 3. So for him, it was almost in shock. Like, I can't believe it, right? And so for the employers, once they find it, it's what they're looking for. Majority of the time, it's just a sense of relief. Like, yes, this is now taken off. I have this taken care of. I can get the employee on. And then once that relief wears off, of course, then there's always a sense of urgency. Like, hey, I want you to get the offer letter. Where's it at? I need the employee. I can't lose them. Like, all of a sudden now you're all of a sudden their HR department. And now once you're a partner there, you start saying, hey, we need this, this, and this. The relief wears off. So, but from an employer's perspective, that first initial relief, and thank goodness we found something that is exactly what we were looking for, is what we see the most.
Okay, but let's say that I'm a manager and I'm having a performance problem with one of the people that's an employer of record. How do I proceed?
So how every company handles it a little differently, right? So some companies, you have, from a liability perspective, you have to be very careful on how you look at these employees, because they're not technically yours. You found them, but once you handed them off, it's like someone else to kind of, take care of a family member. Like, you have to kind of be prepared to understand what the EOR contract says, what our responsibility is. So we're very cognizant with our companies to say, these employees are separated for a reason. Consistency is key. Or listen, if you understand that they're our employee and that we're assigning them to you, you can end the assignment as well, right? So the employee in and of itself has a certain limitation in working too, that you have to measure the relationship to remember, well, that's not technically our employee. This is someone who is being assigned to us. So usually we work hand in hand with the companies because they want to keep the employees. They want to communicate. So they reach out to us. Hey, can you help us with this? How would we go about this? Or there's just other times where it doesn't work out and they'll separate from the employee pretty quickly, because for them, they're extending and they're really putting a lot into hiring someone remotely. So I find a lot of businesses are not super patient with it. It doesn't work out. They kind of really learn to separate quickly and get right back into the hiring phase and starting recognizing, because it seems to me like remote employment exposes the weaker employees much quicker than an office does. And so those people that are really designed to work from home are really good at it. And those who think they're ready to work from home and who aren't get exposed pretty quickly. So we do see a high rate of turnover within the first 60 days for a lot of our clients. And then once that 60 days goes, we usually will see them 2 or 3 years that they'll stay with the company.
Okay. So if I'm a manager and I'm having a performance problem with one of my people that are hired by an employer of record or part of that organization, I can work with that organization that, for instance, your organization, and say, hey, I need to get this person some coaching. So is that coaching done by the manager or the employer of record, or both?
So in the best interest of the employee, right? Because if they're willing to take the risk, because they could separate from the employee, we just let the manager, give the coaching or say whatever the employee, so that way they can continue the relationship, because it's in the employee's best interest to listen or be coached from the expert. right? If there's something that is more, if it's performance related, yes. If there's something HR related, then we always handle it, right? If there's someone in California that's not punching out for lunch or something of that nature, we'll always handle anything that comes from our handbook or anything of that nature. We'll communicate to the employee to make sure that we're effectively letting them know those things. But everything work related, we just have the companies tell the companies to work with them and just kind of follow up with us and let us know on the progress of what was discussed, so we're aware of what was, so we have a record of it.
Okay. So now let's take this from the employee's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So there's those employees that are hired directly by the company, and then there's those that are hired through the employer of record. Now, is there times where there's maybe a cultural divide, or things like that can happen?
So I would say sometimes there can be a misunderstanding of the employment relationship, because when you are a company, you're selling someone on the culture of your company, you're selling someone on coming to work for you. So you're talking to them like they're coming to work for you, and you're really not discussing. It's almost kind of like, you're leaving out the elephant. Like there's an elephant in the room, but you can't really see it. Like it's not there. It's a little one, right? And so they're not really explain it perfectly as to what they're doing. They're trying to gloss over it so the employee doesn't really focus on it. But they'll sell the highlights of the OR. Don't worry, we got you covered. We're gonna offer you great benefits. Here's what you have. We're using a partner in the U.S. Just say using as a partner. They don't really say someone's gonna hire you. And so sometimes in the speed of it, it can kind of get lost a little bit. But for the employees, I've spoken with a lot of employees, because I'll talk to them personally, because to help them understand, or if we have international companies, as you can imagine, United States benefits are just a disaster. So for them, they don't even understand them. So a lot of times I'll have to call the employees and kind of talk about it from a perspective, hey, this is what you have, this is what you have access to. And a lot of times the employees are like, this is way better than I thought it was, because a lot of them are, everybody, they want to be a part of that, like Google, Microsoft, that next company, and say, I got it, I got shares and all those type of things. So you'll see a lot of them just focused on their shares and those type of things. And they really have already kind of prepared to not have the robust benefits that they just left, or they're making a leap of faith, and then come to find out they get sent that now they're going to have a safe harbor 401k, they could have a zero deductible PPO, they can have $5,000 maximum amount, they can have benefits almost better than where they left. Now they're like, well, this is way better than I ever thought it was going to be, right? I was like, I thought I had to give these things up. Or sometimes we'll have the employees literally recruit us, and they'll find us and send the information to their corporate headquarters in like Sweden or Italy and be like, hey, just want to let you know, this model is over here. If you guys really want to take a look at it, this would be great. So in some cases, the employees are bringing us to the company. So as you can imagine, they're doing their due diligence and saying, hey, I really need health insurance, or we're losing people to this kind of Band-Aid method we have because they just had a child, or he just got married, and now he really needs something, and now benefits, in the healthcare marketplace just aren't cutting it. We lost them to a larger competitor. So that'll usually start waking people up to say, hey, we really need to think about this a little bit more effectively. And so the employees will actually bring us to the table, and they are big fans of it. And obviously at times the lack of understanding can create a problem if we don't know that the employee is there. But most of the time, the employees, we have little to no problem with the employees or calling us, or any kind of disagreement, other than if something happens in the workplace working for the company they're working for.
Sean, so when it comes to, like you mentioned 401k, I'm just curious. Yep. So do you have to duplicate each company's 401k plan, or are you able to?
No, we only have the one that we have. So as you know, the IRS limitations based upon ownership, you have to offer the same 401k plan that is offered to all of the employees kind of internally at Venture. So Venture's 401k plan is the plan I had to put in place.
Okay. So
what we tell them, that's what we have, right?
So it would be different than the company's own 401k plan.
It could. A lot of times our companies don't have them, but say for some of our very large companies, we do say that, look, we can match the benefits, but the 401k is as good as it's going to get. So sometimes they might give them a little, like a stipend or something, to where obviously we know it's not automatically, they can't put it in there, but it's say, this is for your 401k, do with whatever you want. But that'll be some sort of workaround. But that's 401k is, it's a no-fly zone. You can't touch it, right? So
What about some other ancillary benefits? I mean, let's say that you're an employer, one of your customers is providing fertility benefits for some of their people, and then they reach out to their employer of record and say, well, okay, they're not providing that. So can there be a negotiation to where you can expand certain benefits or programs?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. So when FMLA applies or a federal program applies, obviously that takes precedent over everything, right? So we communicate up front. We know ahead of time going into the contractual relationship. We've already discussed the FMLA parameters, what comes up, how it's going to happen. And then we also discuss when there isn't a possibility of FMLA to also understand that, hey, this is going to be a either a paid leave program or there's going to be an unpaid leave program. It's not going to, they always want to call these things. And we're like, well, those things have very defined circumstances. Mm-hmm. This is not that, right? So we work with them to set up parental leave programs to make sure they'll reach out to us to say, hey, we recognize that these are getting more popular in the United States and those type of things. Right. I will tell you, one of the most compliant things we ever got was we got a huge influx of a lot of our international companies. Remember, right after we had the overturn of Roe versus Wade and those type of things, we had a lot. Hey, we want to make sure, is this covered in insurance? Is this covered? And all these other things. So there are a lot of things that kind of come to the table to where they reach out for those things to make sure they're covered, or they worry about the employees and they want to make sure. So I would say probably 90% of our employees are in better circumstances working for international companies than they would be almost working for U.S. companies, with the way that even the smallest companies place so much importance on a lot of these things. Like EAP is big, mental health is becoming very big. All these companies from around the globe are really asking very insightful questions. And so those ancillary products that we can offer has become a huge benefit. And we work with them to really encourage them to offer these things. So when they bring it up, I'll dive right in. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. You're going to find better applicants. It's going to be fantastic for your employees. And so we work with them to create programs specific to what they're looking to do for their employees.
Great. Well, we are coming to the top of our time here, Sean. What are the key things that you would like our listeners to walk away with, to remember?
I think the most important thing is don't hold back what you need for your company and let remote employment be an issue. Embrace it, look into it, see what it's all about, try to create a culture around it, because what you find out is when you embrace remote employment, you get a high level of engagement from the employees you have. You change their life at home without them even knowing it. So I would really highly encourage everyone to make sure you're prepared. So one day if that employee comes to you and says, hey, my brother's ill, or my mom can't take care of him, and can I go work from Chicago? Can I go here, or those things? And a company to say, no, you can't, or I'm sorry, we can't allow that, or we don't have that. Really, I think the more you look into recognizing where the best talent is for the company and eliminating any barriers to acquiring that talent, I think you'll really start to prepare yourself to be a great employer moving forward. And I think it will open you up to a whole new level of talent acquisition for your business, and really create, as you all probably focus on the most, paying for the talent commensurate with where they live, their quality of life, how happy they are. Because some people can be absolutely miserable making $50 an hour, and someone making $25 an hour for the same position in a different part of the country can be like the happiest person in the neighborhood. So I think when you get to understand and open your mind to the different areas of talent acquisition and how that can do it, embracing remote employment can be an extremely positive environment for your culture and moving forward for your business.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Sean, for sharing your wisdom around this topic today. It's been great learning a little bit more about the employer of record model and how it can help companies expand globally. So thank you so much.
I really appreciate your time. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
All right. Well, take care.
Right.
And
to
all our listeners out there, we'll see you next week on the People Strategy Forum. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.